Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1791 was on its last legs, as we know now. But a few formalities had to be signed off. One was a document, the Mutual Pledge, signed on the 20th of October. But was it too little, too late? 4 years later, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was no more. But how is it today? Join me, Jan Darasz, for how we got here.
Poland and Lithuania in the Middle Ages faced a common threat in a German Teutonic order. A union was logical at the Battle of Grunwald in 1410 between Lithuanian and Polish armies. As a result, Lithuania's Christianization was recognized and secured, and the regional balance of force was established. The victory led to formal creation of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth in 1569, shifting the regional balance of power. The Commonwealth reached the peak of its power around 1619, with territories stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea, as a multi-ethnic, multi-religious realm that influenced politics and culture across Central and Eastern Europe. In 1683, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth changed the face of Europe again, this time repelling Ottoman forces in the Battle of Vienna. The 18th century saw the weakening of Polish military on one hand and development of education on the other. The crowning point of Poland's and Lithuania's state building was the May 3rd Constitution of 1791, the world's second oldest written constitution. The constitution was shortly later clarified by the signing of a mutual pledge. Unfortunately, it also turned out to be a Union's swan song. Following the dismantling of Polish statehood by Russia, Prussia and Austria in 1795, the Commonwealth disappeared, but the idea lived on until the age of nationalism in the 19th century. The once close ties between Poland and Lithuania dissolved under the pressure of the nation-state in the late 19th century. But in the next, the two countries found a new common cause, with the Russian threat looming on their doorsteps.
I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Marcin Zaborowski, the Europe editor here at TVP World. Welcome to the programme.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, before we go into the current state of relations between Poland and Lithuania, can you fill us in on the background? The background is very almost unique perhaps in European history. The union of these two countries, Grand Duchy of Lithuania and the Kingdom of Poland.
Well, I think that the context is very unique in many respects. I mean, we had many attempts at unification of Europe in the past under the Roman Empire, Napoleonic Europe, then the Austro-Hungarian Empire, but almost all of them were done by force. And all of them were done with in the condition when there is a clear hegemon and then a kind of almost in a vassal state, all states. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth came into being on equal footing between two, one would like to say the nations, but really it was 14th century, there were no nations as such.
Yeah.
But leaders of both Poland and Lithuania were convinced that they were faced with a common threat, and that threat were Teutonic Knights in the northeast of Poland and northwest of Lithuania. So with these both states being threatened by a common enemy, they decided that, well, it's time to form some kind of a union. They formed the union first personal between with a king, basically a former Lithuanian prince becoming Poland's king, and then setting up a dynasty. Essentially a Lithuanian dynasty which then became Polonized and became a kind of a Polish dynasty of Jagiellos,
yes,
which came to rule in much of Central Europe for the next 200 years.
And you say it was a Polonized dynasty. Is this how the process of culture spread from west to east, Latin culture, Polish culture, into Lithuania? What came back from Lithuania? What did Lithuania get out of it apart from security?
Well, the Lithuanian oligarchy, so to speak, got the benefits of joining the ranks of Polish nobility, which became Polish-Lithuanian nobility at this point in time, and that meant certain legal security, it meant certain political representation, including the right to actually, not at this point in time, but in the next 200 years, to take part in the election of a king. So Poland was very unique, and Polish Commonwealth, Lithuanian Commonwealth was very unique in that respect. The king was actually elected by not the entire population, of course, but the nobility at some point was almost 10% of population. So when you look into Europe of 16th, 17th century, the Commonwealth was probably the most democratic state in Europe, with the biggest political representation and with the voting right.
How did this affect the attitude to their own identity by certainly the Lithuanian nobility? You could be Lithuanian and yet be a citizen of this federated state, and yet be Polonized. How did that shape Lithuanian identity?
Well, between when the union was being formed, Lithuania was militarily almost as powerful as Poland, and politically was actually much larger than Poland.
Yes.
It was a huge state, including most of today's, the entire today's Belarus, much of today's Ukraine, even parts of today's Russia. It was a relationship of two equals at this point in time, but then culturally the scales tilted more towards the Polish part of that. Mostly because of cultural reasons, but also religious reasons, because Lithuania had to be Christianites,
yes,
which it wasn't until it joined into the union. The incoming Jagiello dynasty was baptized. They became the rulers of both parts of the state, of the Commonwealth. And then the Christianity was being spread into the Lithuanian nobility, but maybe not so much into the Lithuanian peasantry, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes, there are locals.
So that part of nobility which was christened, baptized, became part of the Catholic Church, did it via the Polish language. So naturally, many of them got Polonized, yeah. Whereas the peasantry and the other parts of the less privileged part of the society, this is where they kept the Lithuanian language. Very often, actually, they were still pagan, but were not necessarily convinced of the wisdom of the Catholic religion and so on, which led later on to some kind of also class tensions.
Formally, the union was ended by force in 1795. Did this idea of a federated state between Poland and Lithuania survive the age of nationalism in the 19th century, or did both Poland, Lithuania, Ukraine, did they go their separate ways in terms of their futures?
That's a great question. It really didn't, because when we are talking now about the decisions of kings, of rulers, of nobility in 14th century, 15th century, nations as such did not really exist then. The national identity was almost non-existent. Yeah. There was an identity of the area, of the region, of my village, but not as a nation as such. And then the modern nations, that's really 19th century, late 19th century in many respects. And as the Lithuanian national movement started to develop alongside the Polish national movement, they decided, especially those Lithuanians who were from the less privileged classes, that they didn't want to be a part of a common project with Poland. That was no longer on cards. That did not necessarily affect many people of Lithuanian descent who were part of nobility and who got really Polonized in many respects. They switch into the other side, yeah. But this new national movement, class-based national movement in Lithuania, was very much looking into Poland as this cultural hegemon, which they no longer wanted to work together with.
A final question to you, Marcin, on the 200 years of the formal unity. You mentioned a dynastic union before then. How is the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth seen now? Can we say it's a failure, as all states are? But does it have these successes that we can carry on into modern Europe today?
I think today we have a real renaissance of still timid, but nonetheless we have a certain renaissance of a Commonwealth spirit. Poland always was very positive about Commonwealth, which was not surprising because after a while, as we just discussed, Poland became more of hegemonic in this relationship, really. Lithuanians, they went through the period during the interwar period that they wanted to reassert that they are different, that the Poles are a cultural enemy, and that they didn't want to work with that. But let's just remind ourselves, Poles and Lithuanians came to form a union because of a common threat, and that threat was Teutonic Knights. Today, there is another common threat, and that common threat is Putin is Russia.
Yes.
And Putin is Russia is what, again, brings Poles and Lithuanians together. In cultural area, in political area, this is probably the closest relationship in the region that Poland has at this point in time. Only yesterday, Poland's president and Lithuanian President Nausėda opened up an expressway between the two countries, which shortens the travel time between them two.
Yes, we'll talk about that after we see the second clip.
Poland and Lithuania were once bound by a royal union, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Today, their connection runs not just through dynasties, but through asphalt, steel and energy lines. The Via Baltica highway now links Warsaw to Tallinn through Vilnius and Riga, a modern spine of the north, cutting travel time and proving that geography is once again an ally, not an obstacle.
Via Baltica isn't just a vital artery for trade and people, it's an artery for military mobility.
Rail Baltica, the long-delayed multi-billion-euro railway, aims to knit the region together on European standard tracks. Progress is slow, but symbolic. And beyond transport, a new kind of independence is taking shape. Gas interconnectors, LNG terminals and synchronized power grids are freeing the Baltics and Poland from all dependencies, building energy sovereignty. So when we look at Via Baltica, we see more than a road, we see a continuation of that centuries-old partnership.
Poland and Lithuania are true partners. We have been cooperating for many years. And when we speak of dual-use capabilities and all the certifications this road has, then if the need arises, though I believe we will live in peace, Via Baltica will help ensure our security.
A common thread has stimulated mutual response, not written on a parchment. Instead, paved with concrete, wired with metal and powered with energy. Viable and independent.
You mentioned the opening of the Via Baltica road link between the two presidents who there opened it. Tell us a bit about how it came about and whether these same strategic factors involved, not just the economic factors, but the security factors involved in the conception of this road. Where does it end and where does it finish as well?
Yes. Well, that's really, the road is not meant to be just to Lithuanian, but it's meant to run through the entire Baltic region. So it's meant to end in Tallinn, in Estonia. So you would have a natural connection not just from Warsaw to Tallinn, but actually almost from Lisbon to Tallinn, running through the for the entire Europe. The same thing, incidentally, concerns the rail, which is even a more difficult project. It's more difficult because European, including Polish rail, runs on a standard European size of gauge.
Yes.
Between two rail tracks, whereas the Lithuania has a post-Soviet one, so post-Russian one. So if you want to move from Poland to Lithuania, a cargo, for example, you need to spend time at the border, about 24 hours for cargo, not for people, to adjust to the different gauge of the rail, which for military transport is a huge loss.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're also integrating their energy systems as well into
Yes.
the European standard.
All of it. But well, Lithuania, before we just mentioned that during the interwar period was an independent state. But prior to that, it was part of the after Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was dissolved, it became a part of the Russian Empire. So the economic links of Lithuania are adjusted to the Russian system.
Yes.
And to change that is taking huge investment, and that's all about like electricity, rail, roads, anything that you can think about, which would make Lithuania more, adjusted to European norms and standards. And we just mentioned a very simple thing of a different gauge of rail.
Yes.
And that's really, from security point of view, from the point of view of military mobility, it's essential, because the security of the Baltic states, not just of Lithuania, but also of Latvia and Estonia, depends on NATO's ability to transport troops and heavy equipment in a speedy, quick and efficient manner to the area of conflict. And that's why it's so important. The same thing is for roads, and of course this expressway, which now leads from Lisbon to Kaunas, the former Lithuanian capital, is a huge improvement.
It has to go through what's called the Suwałki gap.
It has to go through Suwałki gap.
A choke point. Is there military cooperation in NATO as to how to defend that just a few kilometers between Kaliningrad and Belarus in times of war?
Well, that's really NATO's focus these days. I mean, it's clear that that's the most vulnerable place, because that's what divides part of Russia called the Kaliningrad enclave, which formerly was part of Germany, yes, and the rest of the Russian homeland and Belarus, which is really a dependent territory on Russia, is just a very thin stripe. So obviously the first thing which, if we have a Russian aggression, the Russians would want to do was to cut out, yes, that stripe, to connect Kaliningrad, which is heavily militarized part of the of Russia, with the rest of the
yes, cut off the Baltics.
Exactly, and that way, then the Baltic states will be cut off from possible help via the land lines from mainland Europe, sea lines from Sweden and Finland, also NATO members at this point in time, would be more feasible at this point in time, but you can't transport everything by sea.
Coming back to the cultural aspect of our relations between Poland and Lithuania, you mentioned in the first half about the Poland being seen as the cultural hegemon of this union. What are the cultural models that not just Lithuania but Latvia and Estonia, where do they look to as the cultural role model? Does for example Lithuania still look to Poland, or does it look to the United States or to Western Europe, to the EU more?
Well, everybody in the Baltic states is looking towards the United States as the protector. By the way, the Poles do the same thing.
Sure.
So in that respect, we are no different. And that's why Poles and the Baltic states, they usually speak with common voice on various security formats. It's not only the voice of Poland, but voice of Poland and 3 Baltic states, and increasingly of Nordic states. And that's a kind of a group which is being formed now in NATO context of certain strategic coherence. Now,
so there's a Baltic geostrategic sphere.
Absolutely, yes. There's a Baltic-Nordic identity emerging there. And Estonia is obviously looking towards Finland, because there is also a cultural, linguistic proximity even religious proximity too. Latvia is also pretty much looking northwards. Lithuania had the time when it was also under one of the former President Grybauskaitė was saying, oh, we are not Central European, we are actually Nordic nation. But Lithuanians were kind of scratching their heads when they were thinking about it, because you look into Lithuania, you see Renaissance churches, you see Catholicism, you see the history of centuries of cooperation with Poland. So much part of Lithuania is really naturally tilting towards closer cooperation with Poland, but not necessarily on a kind of unequal hegemonic terms, because in Europe of today that's not necessary.
But it's a final question. It's the Timothy Snyder argument that if you're a nationalist in Eastern Europe, you have to go through Poland. Yeah, you can't. The early modern period with the Polish influence can't be dismissed. How is that seen today in Lithuania? Is it a good level of cooperation on the government level, and you still have these simmering residual antipathies towards Poland, or how do you see that?
Well, it's still, I think it's still a thorny issue. I think Poland would be wise to exercise caution and sensitivity there, because yes, indeed, Poles centuries ago came to at the end of the day have more dominant position in this union. Then they Polonized the nobility, and that meant that in reality the Lithuanian national movement was growing on the cultural and economic resentment of anything to do with Poland. So, and then during the interwar period, there was also a very thorny incident. Well, actually more than an incident. There was essentially a coup organized by Polish forces, and as a result of this coup, Vilnius, which is a historical capital of Lithuania, was taken over by Poland.
Yes.
And for Lithuanians, it was illegal annexation, illegal occupation, and for the remaining years of the interwar period, for them, Poland was that enemy, because they took over the capital.
Sensitivity, I suppose, is the watchword, but for the time being, thanks for coming on to the programme, Marcin Zaborowski.
Thank you very much.
Great to have you. That's all we have time for today. Do join us next time. That's Tuesdays, 21:35, 9:35 p.m. Join us then.